With the room and the door and the key made, I now need a player. My player is going to be a first person player, so you'll never see their body, and their eyes will be a camera. And so for this I'm going to use just a very simple cube. You could of course make a full-on beautiful looking character model of whatever you fancy. I'm going to use add mesh cube. Obviously that's a bit big. I've got a view here so I can see the door, so for comparison to how high my character should be. And I'm going to just shrink it down to about there. I think that'll be alright. So that physics would work in our game, it's usually a good idea to put the pivot point, or this center point of a character, if you're doing it like this, at foot level, at feet level, so that they don't sink through the floor when you add gravity and things like that. So to do that, I'm going to go into edit mode by pressing tab. In the same way that we did the door, I'm going to lift it up, but this time in the Z axis, so that orange dot is sitting at the bottom of the player cube. That'll do. So I'm pressing tab to come back into object mode. I'm going to place this at ground level. To help me do this, I'm going to go to view, choose left, and view, and change it to orthographic so that it's very straight on, and just move it into position about there. If I press Z, it gives me an outline version of my environment, and you can see here that's the key, there's the door, there's the room, and this is the player cube. The reason I've done this is so that I can now easily see how tall I should make the player cube compared to the rest of the environment. Okay, so I did come out of my orthographic view there. I found that I just needed to see around the corner a little bit. So I'll go with that again. There we are. So that's going to be sort of neck height, if you like. There we are. Something like that is fine. So that's my player's body. But as for the eyes, the head, I'm going to place the cursor here. I'm going to choose add, and this time I'm going to choose camera. And you can see that's now facing in this particular direction. It's aligned with my cube, so I don't have to do too much. I am going to scale it down so it's a bit more in proportion to the rest of the character, and then I'm just going to go out into a 3D view here so that I can push it around until it sort of hovers over the top of my player's head, if you like. I'm going to go now to view and press ortho again so that I'm back in perspective view, and then press Z to show the solid version of these objects. At the moment, the player's body and the player's head are separate objects. If I move one or do something with this one, it has no connection to the camera here. I need to change that. These two are going to be moving around together and used for exploring the environment. To prepare it for that, we need to do a process called parenting. This is where one object becomes the parent of another, and the parent object will drag around the child object wherever it goes, whereas the child can still have a certain amount of freedom itself. To do that, we need to use the outliner panel over here. This is essentially a list of all of the objects in the scene, and you can see we've not been naming these objects, so that it's all a little confusing. So now might be a good time to name things. If I right click on the room here, and then down here on this orange cube tab, I can pop in this box here and type in my own name for this object, and you'll see it change in the list here. And now the player, you can change it here, you can also rename it here. It does exactly the same thing. Right click, rename, and I'll call this one player. camera, I'm just going to call it player cam. Key. Door. And you see my list makes a lot more sense when I look at it. I can quickly see what things are and easily select them, or in this case, parent them. And to do that, I find player cam and I click on the icon and drag it to the player element of the list. And you can see now that it's got this little sort of slightly faded out camera to represent the fact that this camera is now a child of the player. This means if I click on the player and move it around without me having to do anything else, the camera follows it automatically. In order to make this into a game, it needs to be interactive. To add interactivity, we use the logic editor. That can be found under this menu. So instead of this little clock which represents the timeline, I'm going to choose the logic editor, which is represented by like an old school joystick. You can zoom in and out just like you would in any other viewport, and you can see that we've got these 3 different menus. For each thing that we want to do in a Blender game, we usually use a sensor, something that recognizing when something that's happened. So for example, pressing a key. We have an actuator, which is creating a result of that sensor being triggered. So when we press a key, one of these variety of things can happen. And in the middle of those, we have controllers. There are a variety of controllers. The only one that we're going to be concerned with is AND. So to start off with, I'm going to give the player some directions. It's useful to look at this gizmo here to see which axis is which. I can see that my camera is pointing in this direction, the same as the x-axis. So for my player, that is forwards. Yours might be along the y-axis or facing in a different direction. This red arrow pointing in this direction is positive in the x-axis. So if we were to count distance along the x-axis, it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Whereas behind, or the other side of this center point, the origin, it would actually go -1, -2. So that would be minus values. Hopefully you'll see what I mean in a moment. So first off, I'm going to add some keyboard sensors. I want the traditional W, A, S and D keys to control the player's movement around this room. To do that then, I'll do them one at a time. It's the same process for each one with small changes. I'm going to add a sensor. I'm going to add a keyboard sensor. You can see here the first thing it asks me to do is press a key. If I press in that little box there, press a key, I press W. That's all I have to do there. You can label these as well, so I could put, I might put forwards in there. Over here, then we add an actuator, and the actuator in this case is going to be motion. The first option we get is the motion type, and it's going to be a character motion, because of course this is going to be our playable character. We're going to use this location row, and it actually goes X, Y and Z, even though you can't see the X and the Z here. So as I said, moving forwards, my character is moving along the x-axis in the positive direction, so it'll be a plus value here. So if I press this small grey arrow a couple of times, you can see that's gone up to 0.2. If my player's forward direction was this way, over here, this would be a minus value. I would have set it to minus 0.2. 0.2 is the amount of time, space it moves each time it goes through this process. Each time it recognises that W is pressed, it moves it along that amount. So that is controlling the speed at which I move. So if it's a higher value, I move faster. Then I'm just going to join these two up. I'm going to grab that little dot there, click and drag over here, join them up, and you'll see that it puts an AND in between for me. If I want to test this to make sure that it is going in the direction that I want it to be going in, I'm going to position my mouse cursor over this window, the 3D view, and press P on the keyboard. And you'll see that things go a little bit strange looking, but if I press W, my character disappears off the screen. It goes pretty fast. I'm actually going to change that value. To come out of this test view, I just press Escape, and that takes me back to my normal 3D view. So I'm going to try that at 0.1, test it again. That's a bit more reasonable, still a bit fast. I think I'll put it down to, I'm going to type in 0.05. That's fine. I'm now going to do exactly the same thing for the other directions. So S is going to be backwards. In this case, the location value in the x-axis will be the opposite of what I've got for forwards. So in this case, it would be minus 0.05. So let's go through that. To keep this nice and tidy, you can click these little white arrows here, and that folds them all up when you're done with them. So I'm going to add another sensor, keyboard. In this case, it will be S. From the actuators, I will choose motion, then character motion, and here in the location, I'm going to type it in this time, minus 0.05. I'm just going to drag that across again. Quick test, so pressing P, W, S, W, S. Exactly the same for left and right, but this time in the y-axis. So I will do one and then I will skip through the other one very quickly. Keyboard sensor, I will do A to go left, add an actuator which will be motion, character motion. This time in the y-axis, I can see that the left is in the positive direction of the y-axis, so here it will be 0.05. Join them up. So you can see I'm going forwards and backwards, and now I'm able to go left, but not yet, not right yet. I'll do that now. So I skipped through that, but as you can see, it's minus 0.05 in the y-axis. Test it finally, forward, backwards, right, left. In order to make this work like an FPS game, the next thing I'm going to add to the player is a different type of sensor. I'm just going to tidy these up. It's called a mouse sensor, and you've got this, a mouse event. So you've got a variety of different things that the mouse can do. I'm going to choose movement. Over in the actuators, I'm going to choose mouse again, but this time it gives me things that the mouse can do. Either visibility, showing or hiding the mouse, or looking around. You can see here that we've got a choice of using the x-axis, the y-axis, both, or neither, and they can be turned on and off like this. However, as far as the player is concerned, we only want the mouse to control which direction is forwards, so we're only going to use the x-axis. So I'm going to turn off the y-axis by clicking that like that, and you can see it's greyed out. We can change the sensitivity of the mouse. If I press hover over this screen and press P, you can see that as I move the mouse left and right, it now turns the player. And I'm happy with the sensitivity of that, but you can change it if you wish. Next, I'm going to hold Shift and select the camera. And you can see that when I've done that, it's highlighted both those objects, and it also shows them here. So I've now got sensors for the player cam, controllers and actuators also for the player cam. Because it's going to be this mouse movement from the player that is controlling the camera, all I need to do is from the player cam actuator menu, choose mouse, change it to look, and this time I'm going to block off the x-axis. This will allow the camera to move up and down without moving the player and rotating the player in a strange way. If I follow the original mouse sensor along and just grab the little dot at the end of the and drag it up to the mouse on the camera, the mouse look on the camera. That will now finish off that process. We can't look at it properly in here by just pressing P because the camera disappears. What we can do is change our view to the camera. As I've done that, you can see that we've still got the default camera, the original camera that was in the scene, which I never deleted. You can see it in the list here. I've got camera and I've still got that player cam underneath the player, which it has been parented to. So as far as this camera is concerned, it's redundant. I no longer need it. I shall right click that and delete it. Now when I choose view camera, it takes me to the player camera, and if I press P, I should be able to turn around and have a little look about the place. Not only that, I can then walk around now. So obviously there's no physics set up on this environment yet, so I'm able to walk through the walls and go wandering off into the vast nothingness of 3D space. But you can get a gist of how it moves. I'm going to press escape to come out of that, and then just go back into a more useful view. So there we go, we set up a first person player, we've got our environment, we now need to add a few more bits of interactivity to bring the whole thing together.